before we start Tuneful Tuesdays, I would like to begin a little trivia quiz. I'm going to offer a trivia question at the beginning of each Tuneful Tuesday video. And promise not to look, none of this Wikipedia nonsense, thank you very much. I want you to have a little think about it, and I will give you the answer at the end of the video. Here's the first question. The band, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, you remember them, Relax, all that jazz, Two Tribes and so on, Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Who, the question is, who was Frankie? Hello and welcome to Tuneful Tuesdays. It's a happy day when Tuneful Tuesdays arrives at your device. I know that, you know that too. And in this video we're looking at Masterworks, and we're going to pick on The Doors and an album they produced later in their band life called L.A. Woman. Now this particular Masterworks feature has been inspired by a relatively new Rhino reissue, and I'll talk more about that particular release a little bit later on. As for the album itself, well, this was quite a release for the band back in 1970 it was. It reached double platinum status and featured a host of recognisable ditties, including the top 20 hit Love Her Madly, Riders on the Storm of course, and also the title track. This was the final Doors album to have Jim Morrison at the vocal helm, and was probably the album that most infused blues to a greater degree into the band itself, along some jazzy flavours. Now, Morrison himself hadn't exactly been looking after himself by this time, which can sometimes be reflected in his vocal delivery. This is an album that stinks of booze, saying that the material does complement that delivery to a large extent. And if you factor in the often dirty blues rhythms, well, it all works rather well. Now, some of those blues excursions include Junior Parker's Mystery Train, which happens to appear on the new reissue in a so-called Sessions disc. There's John Lee Hooker's Crawling King Snake, Big Joe Williams' Baby Please Don't Go, which is also on the Sessions disc, and Get Out of My Life Woman, Lee Dorsey's 1966 release, written by his producer Alan Toussaint. Now, the drummer from The Doors, John Densmore, did comment, and I quote, "I love L.A. Woman. I'm pleased with how we approached it, which was to record it quickly in a couple of weeks and with a couple of takes for each song. We didn't get hung up in perfectionism like we did for a few albums." Nevertheless, the production was infused by the spectre of Morrison's addictions. Densmore commented, and I quote, "We didn't have substance abuse clinics back in those days. We didn't know Jim had a disease called alcoholism. He knew I didn't approve of his drinking, but it was a different time. With musicians like Eric Clapton clean these days, I think Jim would have cleaned up his act, but that wasn't his road." According to the guitarist Robbie Krieger, Morrison was, and I quote, "definitely a little rough. He wasn't feeling too well health-wise. I remember him coughing and spitting up blood, probably from smoking too many cigarettes. But in my mind, Jim was indestructible. I thought he'd be drinking a fifth of whiskey a day until he was 90 years old. Guess I misjudged that." In many ways then, the Morrison performance on this album reveals a man in a struggle, in conflict. Speaking as a terribly selfish listener though, it does give the performance a certain frisson. It moves it nearer to the edge. More than that, the entire enterprise sparkled in terms of its production. Now that was down to one Bruce Botnick. Now it's been a while, but I remember talking to Bruce Botnick and his black cat about L.A. Woman. He was the original producer. Now Botnick also worked with the Beach Boys, recorded Love's Forever Changes. He worked with Buffalo Springfield and Tim Buckley, Rolling Stones, Marvin Gaye, plus others. But he's famed for his work with the Doors especially. He said to me, I've been there with the Doors from the very beginning, 19th of August 1966, when we started recording them. We remained friends, being godparents to children. Our relationship has been good. Botnick told me that, and I quote, at the time, we were the same age, single and fancy-free. There was this unknown band that had been playing up at the Whiskey A Go-Go Club. In fact, when they finished recording for the day in the studio, they went over to the Whiskey and they did a set. They were a working band. No one knew them. In those days, we didn't work late evenings. Working until 8 p.m. was a long night, for example. Now, ever since Paul Rothschild, who was the producer of the Doors' first 5 albums, ever since Rothschild passed away in 1995, Botnick has basically been the band's producer and the sort of keeper of the flame, as it were, in terms of everything and anything to do with putting music on the shelf. Botnick said to me in an interview, and I quote, "Great care goes into going back to the original analog masters." And those masters, by the way, are intriguing in themselves. Those original masters were recorded on Scotch 111 tape, offering, and I quote, "huge particles." That's how Botnick described this tape. It was like early Agfa, he said. You could do anything to it, and it kept on ticking. Incredible tape, he said. We've been very careful with our stuff over these years. We've kept the tapes in excellent condition. The environment at the Hollywood Vaults, which is a storage facility designed from the ground up for long-term preservation of film and tape, has been the best archive in the world in terms of standards, he said. Now, you can experience this 50th anniversary set from Rhino, featuring 3 CDs and a vinyl disc. In the set, there's the original album, newly remastered by Botnick himself. Then there are 2 bonus discs of unreleased studio outtakes and the stereo mix of the original album on vinyl. The music is also available from digital and streaming services, as well as a new Dolby Atmos mix of the original album, again by Botnick. As for the mastering of the actual album, this new remastering, well, perhaps there's a smattering of compression here, just a little, maybe. Certainly nothing to be concerned about or to fear, but at loud volumes and crescendos, there's something there. It's just a tiny, tiny touch. In broader terms, the sound offers a complex presentation, rich and full of information, with plenty of focus and precision. Bottom line, highly recommend a listen. Now, that's the end of the Masterworks, but I've had lots of CDs come in recently, and I thought to myself, I'll do a bit of a bonus. I'll do a CD news section. So, if you don't mind hanging on, and if you want to pause the video, put the kettle on, make another cup of tea or coffee, I'll wait for you to come back, and then we'll talk CD news. So let's check out some CDs for you, shall we? Well, CD news, but as per usual, I'll chuck in some opinion as well. For this news section, for some reason, a lot of them are compilations. Compilations are king in this particular segment. I don't know why that is. Coincidence? Who knows? But even so, there's lots of good value here because the compilations from these companies, well, they're all meaty stuff. So to begin with, I've got some jewel-cased goodies from the UK audiophile outfit Jasmine, and the first CD we're looking at is one called Watch Your Step, The Soulful Roots of Philadelphia Soul. This is a 29-track compilation spanning 1959 to 1962, and it celebrates the 50th anniversary of Philadelphia International. It offers a mix of doo-wop, early soul, and roots. So that means everything from Chubby Checker's The Twist to The Dream Lovers' When We Get Married, and from Dee Dee Sharp's Ride to the Bluebells' I Sold My Heart to the Junkman. Staying with Jasmine and staying too with compilations, as I said, and we have the Kings of the New York Blues, Bluesmen in the Session, 1952 to 1960. Now, New York didn't really have an inherent blues culture, but the city still attracted artists from the eastern states. In this case, that includes the guitarist Larry Dale, pianist Bob Gaddy, and guitarist Brownie McGee. They're the headliners here, although there are other artists that share the load via labels like Atlantic, Old Town, Herald and Ember, and OK. There's a whole host of good stuff on this one. Next up, Big Al Downing, still rocking and rolling down on the farm. He certainly hit the piano, did old Al. This is a selection, 30 tracks in all, of Downing's rock and roll outings, even though he could tackle a host of different genres when he put his mind to it, anything from soul to disco to country. This release looks at his work from 1958 to 1962 and includes that classic hit Down on the Farm. This is a time when he did pretty decent impressions of Fats Domino and Little Richard. Another one from Jasmine who've been busy of late, Charlie Walker, called The Complete A's and B's, 1957 to 1962, and more. Now, this was a guy who was the polar opposite of the then fashionable Nashville sound. Nashville sound promoted and created by people like Chet Atkins and Jim Reeves. Walker, a friend of the country star Ray Price, gave you none of that. He was loud and proud, and he wanted you out in the middle, dancing your socks off. So, less Nashville sound and rather more honky-tonk. Let's skip to a different label now, Coco Mojo, and two separate CD packages called Spotlight. These are multi-fold-out gatefold digipacks that feature a potted biography of each artist. The first one we'll look at is Spotlight on Jackie Wilson, called Mr. Entertainment. This is a 30-track compilation ranging from 1953 to 1963, and principally features Wilson as a solo artist, singing songs like Reet Petite and Come Back to Me and Love Train. But there's earlier tracks from his time as a lead vocalist with Billy Ward and the Dominoes, plus later tracks where he partners Linda Hopkins. The other Spotlight release is devoted to Sam Cooke. This is an interesting collection because it looks at different parts of the Cooke oeuvre. It's not really packed with hits, but it's all the better for that, and includes songs like Just For You and Swing Low Sweet Chariot. There's also in this pack his work with the Soul Stirrers, plus Cooke's songwriting achievements with the likes of the Sims Twins and Johnny Taylor. Also from Coco Mojo are two new releases from their Songwriter series. These CDs are presented in multi-gatefold digipacks. The first CD features the work of Bo Diddley, while the other looks at the songs of Willie Dixon. So, Bo Diddley is resident on his own CD as a singing artist, but there's also artists singing his songs here too. That means people like Little Walter, Billy Stewart, and Bill Black's combo. On the Willie Dixon CD, you'll find a couple of songs sung by the man, but there's also people on here who are singing Dixon songs like Magic Sam, Guitar Red, and Muddy Waters. Now we'll move to the Broken Silence label, also presented as fold-out multi-gatefold digipacks. there are 2 releases from the label's Sadie's Gentleman's Club series. That's right, this is a series called Sadie's Gentleman's Club, subtitled Exotic Hip Shakers, produced by one Mark Armstrong, and including rather naughty images, so keep these away from the kids. Even so, both of these 30-track compilations include cracking songs from the likes of Howlin' Wolf, Roy Hamilton, Ella Fitzgerald, Darlene Love, the Chantels, Betty James, Solomon Burke, and many others. And finally, let's look at 3 new releases from the Audiophile label in the UK, Ace. First up from Ace is country star Sammi Smith, and her collection Looks Like Stormy Weather 1969 to 1975. This is a 24-track compilation that offers melancholia by the bucket load. Hers was a voice of introspection, desolation, and the state of the broken heart, mainly offering down-tempo outings. Even the up-tempo songs offer a slice of serious drama. Even so, her output is solid, reeks of quality and emotional maturity. She is a good guide when exploring human nature. This one also features 2 unreleased tracks from 1980. 2 more to go and I will let you go. Next up is Mr. Todd Rundgren. The studio wizardry of Todd Rundgren is something we tend not to hear too much about, but this 22-track compilation celebrates that particular aspect of the man all the way from 1970 to 1990, and his work with the likes of, well, deep breath, the New York Dolls, we've got Janis Joplin, we've got XTC, we've got Patti Smith, we've got the Tubes, we've got Cheap Trick, we've got Grand Funk Railroad and the Psychedelic Furs, and on and on and on. Here, Rundgren moves from Hollywood's ID Sound Studio to Burrsville, to his own self-built secret sound studio in New York, his own Utopia Sound in the Catskill Mountains, and then on to Sausalito, where he produced several artists in the San Francisco Bay Area and beyond. There's a whole heap of quality from this one. And we have a compilation curated by writer John Savage called Symbols Clashing Everywhere. This compilation has a narrow window from 1977 to 1979. Now, this is a double CD compilation of a time and a place, but never a cliche. What I like about this compilation is that it moves away from the genre label that this particular time was all about punk, only about punk, and nothing but punk. Yes, the Damned are here, the Adverts and Subway Sect, but you can see post-punk already pushing through via John Foxx's Ultravox, as is minimal synth from early Human League. There are avant-garde leanings from Suicide, there are indie buds from the Monochrome Set, and experimental artistic rock from Scritti Politti. The cherry on the cake is Sheila B. Devotion and her track Spacer, created by Chic's own Bernard Edwards and Nile Rodgers. Disco in the heart of punk? You bet. And that's it, folks. Thank you very much for sticking to the end of this particular video. And before we go, you want an answer, don't you? You demand an answer to that earlier trivia question, all about Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Well, let me help you out on that one. So, who was Frankie in the name Frankie Goes to Hollywood? It was, of course, Frank Sinatra. The band name was a fictional headline in a newspaper in an illustration by the Belgian artist Guy Pielart, hopefully I pronounced that name correctly, which pictured a young Sinatra surrounded by swooning Bobby Soxers. So if you've ever wondered, there you are. Now you know. I'll have another trivia question for you next Tuesday. And that's it, folks. That's Tuneful Tuesday for this time around. But I will have another one next week. And what are we going to do next week? I think we might have a ramble, a musical ramble, I think. Some musical ramblings, I reckon. Anyway, before you go, if you could do me a favour and just click down yonder on the old subscribe and like button, that would be a great help to the channel as a whole, because it just keeps it moving along the YouTube algorithm. And I will be back next Friday with a hi-fi related video of some sort. What are we going to do? Well, I don't know. There might be some news on the way, possibly. I'm not sure. I might change my mind, but it could be news. We'll see. Anyway, I hope to see you then. Until that time, folks. Bye-bye for now.